Hi, I'm DJ Mafia, and I am here today with Maddie Lester. I'm so excited. A little bit about Maddie. So she graduated from Ithaca College last May in 2019. When she was at Ithaca College, she was part of the WICB FM news team, and she was part of Ithaca Now too. During her college experience, she interned with ABC 7 News in Washington, D.C., and had an internship in London as well. Currently, post-grad, she's working at Fox News Radio in New York City. So Maddie, thank you so much for joining me. It's so great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I love WICB.
Ooh, it's probably nice to sort of reconnect with us a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Got to go back to your college roots.
Ooh. So first of all, I just sort of want to check in with you. It's quite a crazy time out there. How are you doing? How's your family doing with the COVID-19 health crisis?
Yeah, we're doing well. We're all quarantined together. So, trials and tribulations of, family quarantine. But so like you said, I work in New York City full time for Fox News Radio. And because of the coronavirus pandemic, I have gone back home to Los Angeles, which has been great. Usually my day starts at 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., but with the time difference in LA, I actually work from 3 a.m. to 11 a.m. So a little bit of an adjustment on your body there, but it's all good. That's the business. But we're all doing really well. We're all holding in there together. So good stuff.
It's probably crazy to be the night shift worker, but then you're also done at 11 a.m. and you have the whole day, I guess, to yourself. So probably a little bit of a balance on both ends.
For sure. And, when I started working in radio, I started out as freelance. So I would have a variety of shifts starting out. So I was like take the graveyard shift. So I would work sometimes 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning. And sometimes I did like the 6 a.m. 2 p.m. shift, which is now my full-time shift. And then other times it'd be 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. So you're really scattered all over the place. And like every shift has different responsibilities and different things attached to it. So you kind of get a feeling of what is expected of you in the different shifts, the different parts of the newsroom, what that looks like. So as crazy it is like on your body and trying to like navigate that, it's actually really an invaluable experience getting to know the different parts and like the inner workings of the newsroom like that. So I will say, that's the benefit of that.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your job sort of in New York. What was that like? What did you do? What did like a normal day sort of look like? Was there a normal day? Was there not? And now sort of being remote, what does that now look like, that dynamic? How has that changed?
Yeah, definitely. So my job so I am a production assistant for Fox News Radio, and what that looks like every day, it changes, which is kind of the beauty of it. You walk into the newsroom every day not really knowing what you're going to be doing. You have some idea, we every day I write news copy for the affiliates across the country in terms of what's going on. And, we research local, national, international news. And, for the meat of our production, we work off of something called iNews, which is like our main like script writing platform. So in iNews, we'll write scripts about if President Trump's having a presser. Recently it's been a lot of like coronavirus briefings, Governor Cuomo, governors across the country holding briefings. The cutting things internationally, just about like what's going on in China and what's happening like in all of Europe about the coronavirus. And so that's been our main focal point of coverage right now. But usually it's kind of like gathering just a bunch of different information all over the place, usually different stories, different reporters, different things happening, and writing about that. So you have like news copies, like you're writing the intro, you're cutting up the soundbite on Adobe Audition, you cut that down, so you send that into another software program called Enco, and like we have a line editor, make sure your audio is all good, they check that, and you write like a tag and some other things to go along with it, and like that's one little like story bit that you have, and that gets pushed through like affiliate stations across the country. So a big part of my job is writing that kind of news copy, cutting audio sound bites, and then other, taking in reporter calls, which is something that I can't do remotely. So what that means is so the newsroom in Fox News Radio has two spots. We have the terrestrial side, and we have Fox News Headline 24/7. Oh, I guess it's three because we also have the podcast side. So what I do for terrestrial is different than obviously podcast and Fox News Headlines 24/7. Fox News Headlines 24/7, they have live shows every hour. For terrestrial, like they use some of my clips. So if President Trump is doing a presser about the coronavirus with Anthony Fauci and members talking about what's going on, I'm cutting that up. Like they'll use that for their live shows, and like when they build their shows, they'll probably use some of my cuts for that. We don't build shows on our side. We are responsible for like taking in those pressers and those conferences and like the actual things happening and writing about it and pushing those cuts out for other people in Fox News kind of at their discretion. With those scripts as well that we're writing. But when I talk about like looping back to reporter calls, every hour at the top of the hour, there is a live show there's a live show and there's like a lot of things going on in the news. I have to like think about it. So every hour at the top of the hour, there's a live news program. So what that means is they have to have new content every hour at the top of the hour, and they have different reporters call in and report from their location on the stories they're doing. So when they call in, it's the PA's job to take that call in. And so when they call, they'll be like, it's like a 30-second hit of, here's what's going on. One of our reporters is like John Decker, Fox News. So, and they tag out quickly. Your job, sometimes like, let's say it's, we have a show at 11, sometimes they don't call until 10:55, 10:56. So you have to like be on that, like you have to route it on your computer, set it up on the phone, like make sure you have everything going, get the call in, record, make sure it's all good, recorded. Sometimes they'll have a lot of pickups depending on, which reporter you're doing. Sometimes they want to make it better depending on the time constraint. So you have to like pay attention as they're recording, because you're not going to have time really to listen to it back like when you have to push it out. So paying attention to that, while also like monitoring their audio levels and keeping track of the time. So editing, so you have to edit that production piece, their little soundbite down, and then push it out to the producer. And at first, like that was the thing that really stressed me out in the beginning, because it's like they don't have that sound, like that's what plays at the top of the hour. It's like that's their soundbite, and it's like if you don't have that for them, like you're gonna mess up their whole show. So it's like there is the added pressure of like it doesn't matter if they're calling like a few minutes before, like you're gonna have that done, you're gonna have it done well, like it's gonna sound good, and you're gonna get that to them, because otherwise like you don't really want to know what's gonna happen, because they're so awesome over there. But so that definitely for me was keeping track of that, being very time efficient with that, because like you have a whole show depending on like making sure like that backup is in. They're called for backups because like in case something happens, like they're gonna need to use that. So like they really depend on having that piece. So as a PA working remotely, like, we can't take reporter calls in because that's something specifically we do in the office, because there's a lot of different programs we have to use to set that up. But so reporter calls is definitely like one of the more challenging things at the beginning of that, just because like the pressure of that was definitely intense to begin with. So like, oh, I'm taking care of the time, and it's already like 10:57 and I haven't called in yet, and like I need this backup. So that was stressful at first, but that's just something that comes with time and practice and like supportive editors. So that's something I can't do remotely is reporter calls, but like when I'm working remotely, the thing that I can do is still like writing scripts, pulling audio, editing audio on Adobe Audition. So none of that has changed, but the main things, like we don't do interviews remotely. That's something like we do in the newsroom as well. So we don't do interviews, we don't take in reporter calls, and some of like the day-to-day operations that I have to do for the editors don't really exist anymore, but like the meat of it, which is script writing and audio editing, are still very much available, and we're doing that.
Awesome. And it's good to hear sort of what you did, and it's things are still going, radio is still going, but sort of
definitely
with everything going on. So
yeah.
And we're talking about this earlier before we started the interview, but I'd love to hear, probably coming from Ithaca, and especially Ithaca College,
right,
quite liberal, and then Fox, which is conservative on the political spectrum. What has that been like to you? Has it been a shock? Is it not as much of a problem working. It's more so about the work itself than what they're talking about, the content. What's your experience been with that?
Yeah, no, those are great questions. So, and it's a fair question because when, students are applying for jobs out of college, they're looking at different stations and different programs across the country. And, there's huge media conglomerates like MSNBC, NBC, people are applying to, New York Times, Washington Post, much smaller, amazing news outlets as well, smaller local NPR stations, smaller newspapers, which are extremely, those are invaluable experiences, definitely. But so, like you said, coming from Ithaca College, which is a, predominantly, liberal campus, and Fox News, which is, not, one of, if not the only really major conservative, media conglomerate in the country, that's kind of not like a Breitbart, but, has the same kind of standing as MSNBC and NBC in terms of like, national attention in a more serious way that people, millions of people watch and, pay attention to. But instead of like MSNBC or NBC or CNN, it's Fox News has a very different tone, which is you can watch like the pundits, you have Laura Ingraham, now Chris Wallace, Maria Bartiromo. You have a lot of the TV reporters, and some of them, are very unapologetically in line with President Trump, and they definitely don't really have an issue in pushing that agenda forward. And so coming into that kind of environment, I definitely had my own ideas of what Fox News was. So, I have to say, coming out of college, Fox News, when I was originally applying to places, it wasn't something I was really considering because, there's always, Ithaca College kids like to joke, it's kind of like, do I really want to be a cog in like a multi-billion-dollar machine, right? So it's like, so you have to think about things like that and like, do I want to be in an environment where I think everyone's going to be peddling some kind of partisan agenda? Like what do I look like in that? Like what does that look like, for my reporting? Like am I going to be able to do that? Like align myself with that kind of mentality when, maybe, even though you believe in trying to be objective as much as you can in journalism, which in itself presents its own issues. It's kind of like the whole thing of, journalism isn't, one side says, experts say you shouldn't be drinking bleach. Other people say you can. Like journalism isn't reporting, two sides say this, it's don't drink the bleach. Like this is not good. Like this will kill you. So, working for somewhere like Fox, I originally had figured, this is going to be, maybe really difficult because, based on just what you see from TV, it's very easy to have, that idea like, okay, this is what this is going to look like. And I don't think it's going to, that might not work for me as a journalist. But I have to say, like when I, got to Fox News Radio, I've been surrounded by incredibly supportive, middle of the road editors who, are very careful about, we have to, at least on the radio side, presenting not only the facts, but also, President Trump, if they want something cut, because unfortunately kind of the nature of the beast is if Trump is saying something salacious or if he's saying something about like, calling climate change the Chinese virus, not Chinese virus, if he's calling climate change a Chinese hoax, right, something, and that's kind of like, it's going to gain attention on Twitter. And like when he's going off on like maybe one of his diatribes on, one of his pressers, and we're looking at that as well as like what's blowing up on Twitter as like he's going along. If you see something, fortunately, like a lot of what he says that may not be, politically, that may not be just accurate are going to be blowing up on Twitter. Like if he attacks somebody, if he's calling something, something a controversial name or, something that's like really going to stand out to people. It's going to, if he says something that's going to make people like really angry or like really like him, like those are things that are going to like probably that are kind of blow up on Twitter because everyone's going to have something to say about that. So unfortunately, when we have to cut stuff like that, we have to be careful of also saying like, even though President Trump is saying that, historically, like this is what's happened. Like for instance, like when he hosted the when he was planting trees at the White House for Earth Day, writing the script, like, he's talking about planting trees and helping the environment, but historically he's also called climate change a Chinese hoax. And when he came into office, he dismantled a lot of Obama era like environmental protection, his environmental protection, from that administration. So improving a little bit of examples of that without going too far into it. So it's kind of serving that balance as well. And it's also just like, which can, because a lot of, even this morning when President Trump was talking about, for example, like ventilators, and he's like, never in this country has anyone ever had a shortage of ventilators ever. So you have to kind of like, and people are going to be talking about that because that's not true. Like, that's just, if you look at, anything online where people have just been like, doctors have had to make life or death decisions about who's going to breathe and who's not going to be able to breathe. That's a shortage of ventilators. So it's hard to cut things because you don't want to just put that out there because people are going to hear that and be like, okay, well, President Trump said it, so it must be true. And they're not really going to care if a reporter is saying it's not true. So it's kind of an interesting line to walk in terms of like, how much do I want to cut that? And if it's not true, and put it out there and like maybe have some context at the end, because if he's saying it, people might just tune out and be like, okay, well, he said it, so, whatever. So that's definitely a hard line to walk sometimes, is how much do you actually want to put that out there and correct it versus how much do you just want to like not report on it at all. But, working at Fox, you also have to keep your audience in mind, which is,
largely
a conservative, middle to older American public. So it's, even though, you have I've had this great experience of amazing editors and a supportive staff, you definitely have to consider who you're writing for, who you're reporting for. But, my mentality too is like, when people listen to it, it's going to rile them up in some way. So, but yeah, I will say it's been for me an incredibly positive experience, and not at all what I thought it would be, which I think is something important for, kids in journalism to maybe understand. And like, of course, like some people are just going to go straight into like grassroots local newspapers and radio, and I'm totally behind that. I think that's amazing. Like for me, I just knew I really wanted to be in New York City and work in radio, and I mean, I applied to a ton of places, and Fox is kind of where I ended up. And thank goodness, because it's been a really great experience for me, especially taking away, even like I said before, the stigma of what Fox is and who you're reporting for. It's you as an individual reporter getting better and working with people who've been in this industry for decades, teaching you, this is how you write a script effectively and thoughtfully, and how do you make something. It's like having your little news show in like 30 seconds. How do you make something, condense all this information about like the IMF saying the economy is going to contract by 3.3% when it's supposed to expand 3.3% by the end of the year, and having all this, for example, like data, like economic data thrown at you, and different parts, different variables moving around, and like condensing that into this engaging storytelling way that makes people not only understand it, but also engage with it. So I think that's also been incredibly valuable, is just learning how to do that more effectively from people who really know what they're doing. So, but yeah, I guess it's just like a long-winded answer for saying, like, yeah, I mean, Fox does have this reputation because they do have people who represent and are on the face of that industry, the face of that company, who are Trumpers for sure, and they are pushing, that agenda. But I think you also have to look at like the reporters on the ground and the people, the people working in, the individuals working for the radio side of it, and they're really trying to produce good content that tries to represent, I don't say fair and balanced, because I know that's like the Fox slogan, is like fair and balanced news. Sometimes I don't want to be cliche like that, because that's in itself has a lot of things going on there. But yeah, so I will say one of my editors, if I didn't say this, he'd be mad at me. He's always like, cut the cuts. That's our morning news mandate, is cut the cuts. And I think that's just like applicable to everything in life. It just means like when he says cut the cuts, it's like, do your work, like push the cuts out, write your scripts as quickly, not as quickly, but like it's as quickly, but not rushed, and as effectively as you can. And it's kind of like my mentality now, just like cut the cuts of life, just like get in, do your best effectively, don't rush yourself, but like get it done, get in, get out, and just like do what you can with it.
I think that's so cool that you sort of realized that, maybe you didn't know what you were, gonna end up dealing with going into the job, and sort of having all these connotations of what Fox News is, with that you're sort of, like you said, just sort of trying to learn the industry and the ins and outs, and sort of being your best and trying to focus on the job. I think that's just really wonderful. Sometimes it is the place and the people can make it, but sometimes it's about if you're trying your best and you're just trying to learn and trying to do what's best for the organization or company you're working for, and you're just trying to sort of promote your, skills and enrich them and learn from people and quoted somebody that you learn from, like that's just, really wonderful. Sometimes it's more about the work and just, learning how to do things than necessarily what it is that you're doing, I believe, So I also know that you got sick with COVID-19. So let's hear about this, 'cause this is interesting.
Yeah, so I've kind of had an interesting, it's been a wonderful, interesting roller coaster working at Fox. It's just a really interesting time to work in media right now, right? Because I just got out of college and I'm like, here I am world, here I am New York, and I, started my job. I started out as freelance. A few weeks later, I got promoted to full time, and then a month, if not like a month and a half after that, or like a few months, I have no concept of time apparently. A few months after that, the coronavirus pandemic hits, and this is unprecedented, catastrophic thing that's kind of like sending everyone through a loop, and especially like in media, the impact of that. And so beginning to see that and work on the front line of that was really, especially at a place like Fox, which is not a company that I saw myself working for originally. It was just a multi-layered, rich tapestry of things going on there. So when the coronavirus pandemic hit, I was deemed an essential employee with some of the other PAs, which means when a lot of the parts of the building were shut down, we were still coming in to write the scripts and get in reporter calls, do the interviews, still be one of the people that's kind of like trying to keep things afloat, because the newsroom depends on our cuts. If you don't have audio cuts, you don't really have stuff to produce for radio. And again, that was before we really started working remotely. So I was still coming in, and I did actually end up getting sick, and the company was super transparent and great about it, because I had called and like, I'm not feeling really well, and like a week later, they, let me know that someone in the building actually interacted with me and had the virus. So that actually had made a lot of sense because the timeline lined up exactly. So I didn't go to a doctor in New York City, because it's when things were getting really, it's like in the thick of it, and they really didn't want you to go unless this was like a dire situation. And I didn't feel it was that way, because I feel like many more people needed help that I just did not need, and I didn't want to take away resources. Not that like that's a heroic thing to do in any stretch of the imagination. It's just like, people were dying, and it's like, I don't want to expose myself more. I don't want to expose other people to what I might have. So I did end up getting really sick. And my roommates had taken off at that point. So I was living by myself in the city in my little apartment, kind of like hoping it wasn't going to get any worse than it was. But I had to say Fox was really great about it. And when I ended up getting better and passing a certain quarantine period, I actually ended up being able to go home and work remotely. But it was just, I think that the takeaway of that too is just like working in media, it's kind of like waking up to seeing all these really terrifying doomsday numbers and headlines coming, like punching you in the face every morning and being like, the economy is crippling, people are dying, and there's body bags in Brooklyn, and like there's, the people, the rats started becoming cannibalistic and eating each other. And it just kind of seems like this apocalyptic situation. And also you look in your backyard, it's like, oh, wait a second, I'm living in this situation. Like this is right behind me. And you see people like young doctors, like in the New York Times profile being like, I'm not ready to die yet, and seeing these young people our age and putting their lives on the line for this is kind of like, yeah, I'm going to go into the newsroom because these people are doing everything they can. It's like the least I can do is report what's going on when we were still doing that. But so it was interesting, kind of like being the constant saturation of the coronavirus and then actually getting it yourself. That was interesting, because it's like as much as you cover it and as much as you're kind of like in this all-consuming mode of it, and because when you have to cut like economists talking about it, you cut Trump talking about it, you cut health officials talking about it, people from the CBO, his economic advisors. I mean, you're cutting a million different sides of that different angles of that situation. But like when I actually ended up getting sick, I kind of went to autopilot a little bit, because it's like you have all this information in your memory bank about what this is, what it looks like, how it could affect you. It's like for me, I just couldn't think about when I was sick, and I actually was well enough to kind of keep working remotely at that point, like from my apartment. So I was still cutting things about the coronavirus and what it was doing to people. And it was just like a weird mental space to exist in, because you're seeing what's happening to people and you kind of can't think to yourself, like, is this going to happen to me? Like, am I going to have to go to the hospital? Like, for me, it was just kind of just like, like I said, going on autopilot, like writing the best to the best of my abilities about what's going on, doing my own research, writing the scripts, getting in at the end of the day, just like going to sleep, taking an Advil. And I was really lucky. I didn't get super sick. I was just sick enough. But so definitely like working in media in this time, and then getting sick was just really interesting experience. Trying to, again, like process all that information, and also being like, okay, I just can't let this affect me right now because I have a job to do, and I just can't think about this because it's going to drive myself crazy. Like, just focus on the job, cut the cuts, and just keep, moving forward. So
There was that quote again, but no,
yeah, I'll tell you that is our morning news mandate. We actually have shirts that say that. We have, he made Fox News Radio, cut the cuts on the back, 2 exclamation points.
Well, first of all, I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad you got over that, that situation. I'm glad to hear that. But yeah, I always think it's probably so hard. On WICB, I talk about music and artists, and sometimes health comes up, but when you're sort of in it and doing it day in, day out, and you're talking about it, sort of like sometimes you have to keep that barrier between the emotions and sort of just telling people what's happening and the facts, but that you were going through it as you were like working on the subject and the topic. Like, wow, kudos to you that you sort of were able to not only survive physically but also mentally, emotionally through that space. So and that you're so young starting in this career and sort of is really impressive. So
so thank you. I think it's just something that I went through. It happened, and it's really just like, it is what it is.
Exactly. So now, sort of, I guess, on maybe a little bit of a better note, not that it's a bad note, just
yeah, it's different.
Different note. Exactly. I see you. So you spoke a little bit about sort of what you're doing now and with Fox News and your experience post grad. And I see you're wearing the shirt. I'm wearing the IC shirt representing. There we go.
Of course.
I want to hear about your WICB experience. What was it? Why did you choose to join radio in college? Did you know you wanted to join radio starting off? Is it something that sort of you found throughout your career? And what was it like reporting the news on the Station for Innovation?
Station for Innovation, that's right. Yeah, so I know when I actually went to college, I, at the time, had only written really for like my high school newspaper, and really only had experience in print and the print medium. And that's what I assumed what I would be going into in college. And, I started writing for the Ithacan a little bit my freshman year. And there's so many amazing people who work for the Ithacan. They have a great staff. It wasn't anything like that. I kind of found myself falling out of love with that medium a little bit. And I just kind of like I think maybe I'd been doing it in a way, I don't want to say for so long, because it was just, a little bit before, some stuff in, a little bit before high school and then in high school. So it wasn't like a lifetime of print experience. But when I got into college, it just kind of wasn't really doing it for me anymore. And so I was kind of, for a little bit, my freshman year, kind of wondering, what should I be doing? So I kind of dabbled in ICTV News a little bit, or ICTV a little bit, like the news programs. I still wrote a little bit for the Ithacan. I wrote a little bit for her campus, and some other things I can't think off the top of my head. But radio really wasn't something that had occurred to me. It just wasn't something that I was into in high school, and wasn't too much the forefront of my consciousness. And then someone I always attribute to like Kelly Kyle to the start of my interest in radio. She was really big in the program at the time, and was like, hey, like we know each other, so you should really check this out. I'm like, maybe. And it's kind of like the rest of the history from there. I checked it out, and I just fell in love with it in a way that like never really connected with me for any of the other mediums nearly as much. Because what I love so much about radio is it's the way that the scripts are written, and the way you have to engage people. Like, it's like, for instance, like, I love, this is so cliche, but like, NPR, is thought of like as the gold standard for podcasting, and like Ira Glass, like the king of radio, for a good reason. Like This American Life is amazing, and they're so well done and so clever and funny and interesting. And what I love about that is how casual and yet like the tone of radio pieces, like it's just because like you have the thing I love about like NPR is you have these really smart people who have these multi-syllabic words they could pull out of their linguistic toolbox of explaining things, and like use big words to discuss ideas that can be condensed, but they don't. They the way they write things is just such an approachable and engaging and simple way that it's like they could go on forever and ever, just like, I'm so smart, and like this is how we're gonna I want everyone to know that, and like I'm gonna be so subtly clever about this. So what I love about the radio form, what I try to do in my radio format is engage people in like a casual way, like you're having a conversation with someone. It's not so much I'm talking at you, it's let's kind of like walk alongside each other and take this journey together in terms of like the storytelling, like where is this going to take us, like the reader or the listener and the person actually presenting the story, like Sarah Koenig with oh my god, the Serial podcast, like very famous a few years ago. It's like she has such an amazing style for just like let's kind of find out together where the story's going to take us. It's not like this is what's going to happen, I'm telling you the facts, like this is what's real. It's kind of like, I don't know, like let's kind of like, I just loved her tone of it, of just like so this happened, and just like the way she described things, because with TV you have luxury of kind of having visuals, whereas I think with radio you have to get a little more creative in how you describe something, and like how do you want to paint this picture for people. So I think you have to get really creative with that without overdoing it or getting too flowery. How do you appropriately yet colorfully paint this picture for people, and like how is that going to translate with them, and like is that going to be engaging? And so I really love the medium of script writing of radio in terms of, again, like getting that engaging storytelling across, but also I love being able to like just even like the way you have to like be able to speak in radio, because again you don't have like the visuals behind you, they can't see you. It's how do you, like when you're talking, how do you make it so people want to listen to you? How do you, with your tone and when you're like the cadence, and just like when you're speaking. I know cadence is such like an overused word, so like I hate myself for using it, but so I think it's just, I don't know, it's like love being able to like play around with like my own voice even, and kind of like seeing what's effective, what's not effective, and like having other people tell you, oh, you go up too much when you say this, or like you're going down too much when you're grinding on that and stuff. So kind of have a variety. So just like having people also being able to tell you things that you don't even hear about your own voice, like, well, here's how you make it like less uniform, because every time you go up at the end, like when you're saying something, and like that's at the end, I don't want to even know to do example, but when you, so having like people, it's nice having people being able to also tell you work on this, work on that to get better with your voice. So I guess it's, again, a long-winded like way of just saying I love the way you have to being able to just like creatively get your ideas across in a radio platform. But yeah, it wasn't something I was really gonna get into, but now I'm kind of just falling in love with it, which is kind of like, I know it kind of sounds like an incoherent like tirade of what's going on, but yeah, that's how I feel about it. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to say.
Awesome. And I was actually going to ask you later sort of why you love radio, and you sort of combine what I asked before, and then that idea and your love of radio. And yeah, sort of what you were saying, that's sort of how I feel when you are broadcasting live on TV. It's sort of all there, and the person just has to sort of all take it in and understand it. But when it's radio, it's audio, and then there's also the visual piece, which isn't missing. So there's work to be done. In a way, it sort of feels like a connection you have with the person, because they're interacting with your media and having to like think about it a little bit more and do more in a way that's like kind of like more meaningful. So
yeah, definitely. So that's like parlay into like a bunch of different things. It's like a springboard into like, this is anyway.
Yeah. And then talking about Ithaca Now, the weekly show that WICB hosts, that students go out and report on stories. Were there any stories or maybe people that you interviewed that really stuck out to you that you'll always think back on your Ithaca Now memories and be like, oh, this is like a really good one? Or did you just more so even just like the experience overall and sort of getting to learn so much about the area?
Yeah, definitely. I think like I don't know if I yeah, I think before you were saying like how did that help me in what I'm doing now. I think Ithaca now definitely built were like there's like the solid foundation, like the building blocks for um, working at somewhere like Fox's Radio, because you're coming in with the experience of knowing how to cut the cuts and knowing how to like what kind of sound to listen for versus like what is actually like a really good soundbite versus something that's that you can write into a script easily. Like what is something that's going to really pop out for people and be like, that's a good soundbite. So you really get an ear for that doing Ithaca now, just in terms of like audio editing and like ways to edit it in a good way, and also being like, is this in itself, editing not included, just like a good bite. And also I think the writing experience of Ithaca now really helped with Fox's Radio, because all you're doing all day long for radio, like where I work, is writing news copy. And so Ithaca now, what we were doing is a little different because it was long form journalism, and it was obviously a little more creative, because we just like these, snap hits that go on, every 30 seconds. So we had, obviously a lot more opportunities to make something longer and maybe a little more flowery in the sense of our descriptions and, painting a picture of something, whereas, radio, where I work, it's like get in and get out. But at the same time, like those writing skills are essential. And so, no matter, at the end of the day, like Ithaca now really helped in terms of like engaging storytelling, and it's the same thing for radio. It's just like shorter and it's more condensed hits, but it's the same style of writing and condensing information and getting it across to people in a way that's engaging, in a way that it's easily understandable. So I'm sorry, was there like I think that's like another part of that question.
Just if there were like any stories that maybe stood out to you.
Stories, right? I'm sorry. Okay, my mind. This happens. You get up at 3 a.m. You're just like incoherent.
Understandable.
Yeah. So I worked on a lot of really cool stories for Ithaca now, and like that's why one of the reasons I loved Ithaca so much is like it's the accessibility of certain things, where you work in this rural town where it's like people love to talk to you, like Mayor, Savante Meyer like follows people on Twitter from the school, from Ithaca, and like there's a lot of people are so willing to kind of like, whereas if you're in a big city like in LA, like forget about it. There's a lot of like bureaucratic tape you have to go through, and a lot of people being like, no, I don't want to do that, and a lot more pushback. Whereas a place like Ithaca, it's kind of like this magical realm of journalism where it's just kind of like there's a lot more doors you can go through a little without like all the hassle in a way. That being said, I mean, there's a lot of things that like you're going to have pushback. You're going to have people that don't want to talk to you, and that's the nature of the beast, and that's to be expected. But I have to say, being in Ithaca, it was just so cool to be in a place where like it was just so different from living in a big city, and like the kind of experience of people and things, even the nature of stories we were reporting on were totally different than you would report on a big city. Like one of my favorite stories I ever did was with my very good friend and at time co-reporter Sophie Johnson, and we did a story on the contamination of water in Lisle. And that turned out to be like a really long form investigative piece, where she was on a drive up to Ithaca. She saw like a pipe coming out of like this mountain or out of this cliff, and she's like, well, that's weird. And she saw someone, like a person, getting water out of this pipe, and she talked to me about it at school, and I'm like, that's interesting. And she's like, I wonder like if that water is safe, or like what's going on with that. So it kind of just it snowballed into us thinking about, I wonder if there's like a bigger story here. So we went out and saw there like a lot of other pipes like in Lisle, apparently. So we found out also like in a neighboring community, they had one of the plants there had a meltdown and basically contaminated the entire town and gave people cancer, and it became a ghost town. Like it became completely unlivable. And that happened. That's their neighboring town. I guess it's a few years ago, so like the details might be a little hazy, but it was a neighboring town. And they so we thought to ourselves, okay, like did that contamination spread into Lisle? And because Lisle is a very, very rural community, again, like for context, Lisle is a very, very small town. It's pretty impoverished. It doesn't get a lot of funding from the government. It's kind of like a lot of buildings are dilapidated. Like the more we talk to people, realize that they don't have running water. Like they don't have any of the things, the resources to that I think a lot of people take for granted. Like they just don't have access to that. So one of the things they would do is a lot of people in the community would come to get water from this pipe, which, for us begged the question of like, how safe is this water? Because there are a lot of farms there. So it's like, what about the manure runoff and the farm runoff there? Like, is that getting in the water? Is that getting people sick? So we did this whole thing. We talked to people. Actually, an entire group at Ithaca was actually investigating the water in Lisle and like rural communities in Ithaca. So we talked to the people doing the research on that group. We talked to that professor. My favorite part of that, we actually with Peter as well, we all kind of like went to the car and took off and drove to Lisle and waited at different spots where we knew the pipes were, and just waited for, this is like in the dead of winter too, we waited for people to come to the pipe, and there were a ton of people pulling up to get their water, and we just did like cold interviews with them, like, hey, can we pull you aside, can we talk to you about this? So we had a lot of different people telling us why we got like a truck driver, we got like a mother of five, we got a person who owned her own farm. There's like a lot of different kinds of people, but all at the end of the day, forced to get this water because they didn't have resources to get anything besides that, and finding out, were they getting sick? Had they known anyone who gotten sick? What was their experience with it? What was really going on there? So that was just like, I was really one of my favorite stories, just the scientific aspect of it, and finding out like the data of it and like what's really happening and like, is it dangerous? But the human aspect of it as well, in terms of like, these are real people it's not just like, here's the data, here's the numbers, and like, I don't know if it's bad for people. It's like going out and actually like interacting with people who, were getting this water, and building a story around them as opposed to just like the hard data of it. So I really like that story. And Peter laughed at us because we actually ended up getting like some awards for that, which is pretty cool. So that's maybe why it also sticks with me, because it's like, no ego thing, I'm kidding. No, so that was cool. We got recognized for that by the New York State broadcasters. So that was really interesting. It's like when we were doing it, we were like, this is just something that we're just gonna write about. And they're like, good job. And like that was kind of shocking to us, because it's just like, did not expect that. It's just kind of like a thing we did for fun almost. So that was super cool to see kind of like storytelling you just are interested in getting recognized.
That's so cool. You just sort of did it a story for Ithaca Now for WICB, and that it went so far and it was so popular. And congrats on that award, and that you guys worked so hard to sort of make it and get it to a place where it was recognized, not just heard on air, but then also given credit. Like, that is quite awesome to be able to say that.
Yeah, I say that too, just because like you never know, like to other like students, like you just never know what's gonna get picked up, right? So like even if you think a story is gonna be like, well, I'm just interested in that, like, you never know like who's gonna recognize it, or what's gonna parlay into. So just like as a fun fact, not to be like it's an award thing. It's like it's just cool because like you just never know. So even when you're passionate about something, it's cool because there's a payoff for that sometimes in terms of like you're doing a good job. It's like that's a solid thing to hear, especially with job applications and things where it's just like so demoralizing at all times.
And literally just because there was the pipe that was recognized, and it turned into this whole story, and then like look, like it just
simple things.
Exactly. Just sometimes just keeping your eyes open and looking out for like things that maybe look a little bit strange. And, you never know. Everything has a story behind it, right? So
yeah, for sure.
So then I guess sort of one last question for you. So you spoke a little bit about Fox News and where you're at, and we talked a little bit to Ithaca. So sort of now going back to the present, you think you sort of like reporting journalism, this is your thing, so you want to sort of stick with. And I'm assuming so. I'd love to hear that. And then also sort of what's the power in news and telling stories and giving people information?
Yeah. So yeah, going to your first question, is this what I want to keep doing? Right? Was that okay? Cool. Yeah. So I mean, for me, my fourth grade class had a newspaper, and when I was in fourth grade, I remember like clipping on that little like plastic reporter badge and being like, oh my God, like this is my purpose. And obviously that changes for most people, like definitely changed for like the medium of it. But I have to say, like, ever since I was, in fourth grade, being like, this is Madeline Lester, like writing for, it was called the Hesby Times. And, my first ever story, because this is the kind of person I am, was I tried to do like an investigative thing on a school fundraiser being held at McDonald's and like the health aspect of McDonald's. And I still remember the title being like, am I McLovin' it? Thinking I was so clever in fourth grade, being like, is this the healthiest principal?
Wow.
Is this really the best thing for students? And like, is this like, is this promoting wellness? Because it's like, what are you doing right now, Madeline? But that was, ever since then, so like from that point to high school to college, I just kind of like, I feel like journalism had just become, even though I experimented it in different forms, like I just have always loved journalism. And I think also I'm around a lot of media people in my life. So I think that definitely has something to do with it in terms of like, making of them kind of influencing my fondness of it and storytelling and writing and reading in that sense. But the thing that I really love about journalism is not only you get to write about really cool things, you're writing in a way that tries to challenge people's perspectives and challenge maybe a stereotype or what people think about a certain thing, and like forcing people maybe to have a second look at something, and reevaluating certain things. I really just love that, it's always like journalism is like the fourth estate, it's holding the powerful accountable, it's all those things, but it's also like, journalism for me, it's like, I think it's this amazing thing, right, to try to like, I want to change the world, but it's not really practical because at the end of the day, like I'm probably not going to be able to change the world, but maybe I can change one person's world, or make a difference for somebody. I think to me that would be important, to try to bring light to an injustice for one person or a few people, or just like different things, because on a global basis it's probably going to be less likely that we will accomplish that, if not impossible. But I think it's just this beautiful idea of and potentially with the investigative reporting is just seeing something that doesn't sit well with you or sit right with you in the news, or reading about something that's like, well, that seems kind of off to me, or just kind of like, and then just persistently and relentlessly going after something and getting those interviews and doing that writing process, and just doing your research and your homework and going deeper and deeper, and just finding the truth when everyone doesn't want you to, or like this, the Spotlight team, which is, a very well-known example. It's just like getting to the bottom of things when everyone else is trying to get you out of it and convince you not to do it and scare you off and, intimidate you. And it's just kind of like, I have so much respect for journalists who just go out there and just like won't be intimidated and won't be persuaded to back off of something because they know something isn't right, and they know that it's their job to expose and write about it so like the public can know about what's going on. So that's why I love the museum so much. I know it closed, which is really upsetting, but it was this great thing to showcase these amazing things reporters have done and what they did, at a personal cost to get the truth out there and to hold people responsible for really evil things that they were doing. So I think there's something, it doesn't have to be like, working at a huge media company to be able to do that. It could just be like, and most of the times it's just one reporter doing their research and going after something and finding out the truth and, just going for it. I think that's just a great thing. So that's why I love journalism so much. I definitely see myself continuing it, but yeah, I don't know if you wanted me to comment about anything about like the coronavirus, like actually like what that's like. I know I talked about this a little before, but the coverage of it, if that makes sense, like briefly.
Yeah, if you want to touch about that, sure, I'd love to.
I mean, the only thing I would really say, because I feel like I didn't say this before, but it might be something that like I've taken away, and like I've read articles about, is I think what's interesting is journalists are so kind of, I think, comfortable and well acquainted with being authority figures, being able to say like, this is what's happening, this is how long we can expect a certain thing. They are used to informing the public on what's going on, and people being able to traditionally trust them in that sense. Walter Cronkite, you see him kind of sitting there and delivering the news and people trusting him. And then now I think the coronavirus has really turned that model on its head, because we have to, as journalists, kind of come to terms with, we really don't know what's going to happen. And I think now it's kind of embracing the uncertainty of it all, which can be really uncomfortable, I think, for journalists, because that's not what we're used to. So again, like when you have all these really terrifying, like doomsday headlines dominating the news, and like, again, like, the media, not, I don't want to say the media, but, news outlets, are constantly like putting out, confirmed cases and deaths, and the global economy is tanking. I think while it is very important to tell people the numbers and, the confirmed cases, the deaths, again, with the economy, I think it's really important to contextualize all of it. Otherwise, everyone's gonna like read the worst case scenario, and that's what they're gonna take away. It's not like it could be this, or it has the potential to be doing this. I think that's why contextualization is really important with something like this, because as much as you have people forecasting stuff about the economy and the contracting in the next quarter and the deaths, and like, when are we going to get out of this, and governors saying, cutting governors having different opinions on when they're going to reopen, and like, when is there going to be a vaccine, when are things going to start to reopen, is there a new normal? It's, as a journalist, you have to come to terms with, we don't know, and you have to kind of, more than anything, I think it'd be more comfortable for the public to be like, we're not going to tell you, because that just wouldn't be true. I think you have to, there's like a difference between like aggressively being a journalist and also taking the place of like a public health facility. And I think like in New York Times managing editor was actually talking about that. They're journalists like are getting a lot of their information now from like, the CBO and the World Health Organization and medical professionals. And, they don't know right now what's going on. So it's kind of, we're all kind of like in this boat together, and we kind of have to embrace the unknowingness of it. And I think that's also one of the scariest parts of it all, is the uncertainty of it. But I think it's also one of the most important things that we have to embrace. Otherwise, it wouldn't be, I think that's in our best interest, even though it's scary. I think that's what's going to happen.
No, and I'm so glad you say that, because even like from my perspective, thinking about it when you were talking about this, and I feel like a lot of people feel like this also, they, turn on their dial, they turn on the news and be like, just tell me like everything, reporter, like, like tell me the news and like tell me the whole story. And, sometimes there is, and that's part of the job, but there's also like, yeah, people don't know what's going on. There's so much uncertainty. There's different, people saying different things, and it's really a day by day basis. And I think in a way it's powerful, because a lot of times we're used to just sort of going through a schedule so fast, and it's like hour to hour and meeting to meeting, but this has really slowed us down and been like, we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. Just be in the moment now. Just let me tell you what's happening today, what has happened in the past, what's going on. Let's just relax. Let's just smell the flowers a little bit, because there's not always that like mindset with our just American society of fast pace and move along and get through everything. So yeah, for sure. I think it's definitely a mentality of like, I want to know when this is going to be over. Like, I need to know. And it's like, no one knows. And it's like, journalists especially, like, we don't know what's going on. It's kind of like, let's walk through this together. And like, again, like, that's why I love where it's like, let's just like walk together on this journey and see where it's going to take us. So it's interesting times, definitely. So it's definitely interesting times for media and journalism. It is. Well, I'm glad you brought your insight from today, even like your whole sort of thought, like process of news, and and your career that you're in, and your why you want to be in this career, and the importance of it and the power of it. Like, you seem to have a personal philosophy, and that you are so young in your career and sort of have, I mean, that you knew in like fourth grade you wanted to, but that you sort of over time you've developed this, and the way you were talking and the way that you were doing that, like, it's just, really wonderful. And I really enjoyed getting to hear your thoughts on so many different aspects of what you're doing, and the power of radio, the power of news, looking at the human context, especially with a time like this, it's even more powerful and important now. So I thank you for sharing that tonight.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much I know it's like, I feel like it's kind of like a stream of consciousness when I'm talking sometimes, and it's kind of like, oh gosh, it's going to be like a huge model disaster, but hopefully there are some good tidbits of info here and there in that.
Awesome. No, it was really great, and you did give lots of good, quotes and thoughts, and a little perspective into your world, as reporting on it all, and sort of what it's like, being at Fox News, which is has tags along, things tagged along to it. So, but that you sort of are finding your way and your path is wonderful. So from me, WICB, the staff, we thank you for joining us. Best of health to you and your family, and sort of, hopefully this blows over soon and we'll be back in New York, back to normal. And yeah, it's my hope for you. So, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Have a good one. Thanks, Maddie.
Thank you, you too.